Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Chapter 5, Part 2. Faithful recounts his temptations. Faithful said, "Well, I escaped the big slough which I heard you fell into, and I got up to the gate without much trouble. But I met with a pretty clever woman whose name was Mrs. Wanton. She almost turned me from the right way into the way of destruction." Christian responded, "It is well you escaped her net. You remember Joseph fell into the company of such a woman, and he escaped her, but it almost cost him his life. King David was tempted in something of the same way, only he was drawn away of his own lust and enticed, and he fell into the quagmire of corruption you saw back there in the valley. While it is true the merciful Lord lifted him out, yet he had trouble all the rest of his life." Faithful said, "You cannot imagine, unless you have had a similar experience, what a flattering tongue that woman had. She complimented my courage and good judgment in choosing the right way. She spoke of my seeming strength and healthy appearance and said she thought I would be a lovely person to know. She asked questions about my book and manner of life as if she might be interested in the way of salvation. She wondered if it were possible to attain to the original innocence of Adam and Eve. I suspected that she was trying to attract me to her trim figure by her behavior and sympathetic understanding of human nature. Yet she had a good personality, likable ways, and an agreeable attitude. She was so attractive, especially when she spoke of human freedom and natural love, that she almost persuaded me to turn aside with her. 'Just a little way,' she said, 'just for a few moments of pleasure.' She promised me all kinds of contentment and said if there was anything wrong about it, the good Lord would forgive me as he did David." Christian said, "I'm sure she did not promise you the contentment of a good conscience. No, you know what I mean, all kinds of carnal contentment and fleshly satisfaction." Well, Christian responded, "Thank God you escaped her. The mouth of a strange woman is a deep pit, and he that is abhorred of the Lord shall fall therein." Faithful said, "But I do not know whether I wholly escaped her or not. Why, I trust you did not consent to her treachery." "Oh, no, she wanted me to go to the limit, but I did not defile my body. I remembered a sacred warning which says, 'Her feet go down to death, her steps hold on hell.' I closed my mind to her subtle, seductive suggestions and my eyes to her shapely figure and would not yield to her warm embraces. Then she cursed me and went her way. Yet I cannot say that I have acquired a wholly pure mind since. The Lord knows I wish I had never met her." Christian said, "But maybe you will be stronger and will be able to help others avoid this great danger. But did you meet with any other temptation on the way?" "Yes, when I came to the foot of the hill difficulty, I met a very old man who asked me who I was and where I was going. I told him I was a pilgrim going to the celestial city. Then he said, 'You look like an honest fellow. Would you like to dwell with me for the wages I will pay you?' I asked him his name and where he lived. He said his name was Adam the First, and he lived in the town of Deceit. I asked him then what his work was and how much he paid his help. He said his work was hoarding and enjoying the things of the world, and my pay would be to inherit everything he had. I further asked him what kind of house he kept and what other servants he had. He told me that his house was provided with all the luxuries of life, and his servants were his 3 daughters, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. They had charge of all his work, and they would be delighted to have me. Either one or all 3 would marry me if I would but gratify their wishes. I asked him how long he would want me to live with him. He said as long as he lived, then I might remain in the house as long as I lived, or do whatever I would with the property. I would not then to go on self-denying with the property. I would not then need to go on self-denying pilgrimages. I could pay the traveling expenses of other pilgrims. Many would reach the celestial city by means of my money. Christian asked, well, what conclusion did you and the old man come to? Why, at first I was inclined to accept his offer. He seemed to be fair and quite reasonable. But then I remembered the words of an old faithful pilgrim, the Apostle Paul. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. He that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. Then looking at his face as he talked to me, I saw these words written across his forehead, put off the old man with his deeds. Then what? Then the thought came to me that this old man wanted me for his slave, and once he got me into his house, he would be ready to sell me to anyone who had the money. So I told him I could not give up my pilgrimage to live such a life with him, that I would not consider it, not for all he had. Then he denounced me as a fool and a bigot and said he would send one after me who would make my way miserable. I turned to go, and just as I turned from him, he threw his arms around my body, saying that I was his son in the first place, and he gave me such a pull backwards that I thought I would be pulled in two before I could get loose from him. Then I cried, "O wretched man," and I felt an invisible one take hold of me on the other side, pulling me toward the top of the hill. So I went on my way up the hill, and about halfway up the hill I looked back and saw the one coming after me, swift as an eagle. This one overtook me where the arbor stands. That is where I sat down to rest and went to sleep and lost this precious book out of my bosom, Christian said. Faithful said, well, isn't that strange? But hear the rest of my story. As soon as my pursuer overtook me, he blurted out something and struck me a terrific blow. When I recovered sufficiently, I asked him why he did it. He said that because of my secret inclination to Adam the first, I rightly belonged to his house. Then he struck me again, completely knocking me out. When I came to, I begged for mercy. He said, the law knows no mercy. And with that, he knocked me down again. He doubtless would have killed me, but just then the one who freed me from old man Adam came by and ordered him to desist. Do you know who that person was? Faithful said, I do not. I did not know at first, but as he went by, I saw his scars in his hands and feet, and I knew he was our Lord. Christian said, that man who pursued you was Moses or one of his men. Moses spares no one and knows no mercy. With him, all must pay the penalty of a broken law. His absolute rule is, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. Faithful said, I know it very well. It is not the first time I had met with him. One time back home, he told me he would burn my house over my head if I stayed there. Christian, not changing the subject, but did you see the big house on top of the hill a little above where Moses overtook you? Yes, and the lions too in front of the house, but I think the lions were asleep, for it was about noon. I had so much of the day before me, I passed by the porter and came on down the hill. Christian said, yes, the porter told me he saw you go by. Those lions were chained. I wish you had stopped at that home at least for a day. They would have gladly received you. Their hospitality and fellowship are wonderful. They would have shown you many things that you could never forget. But pray, tell me, did you meet with anyone in the Valley of Humility?